Rain drummed softly against the window, like a quiet clock counting the moments Samantha Brooks wished she could stop. Inside her tiny law office in downtown Seattle, the light flickered pale, tired, almost like her. Stacks of unpaid bills sat beside framed photos of her father, the man who taught her that justice mattered more than money. Now he lay in a hospital bed, and she was the only one left to keep the family name alive. She rubbed her temples, staring at the empty space on her desk where Hope used to sit. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere far away, fading into the night. The city kept moving, but Samantha felt stuck in a loop of exhaustion and fear. The rain sounded almost like applause for her failure. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate. When the door opened, everything stilled. Gabriel Stone walked in, a man known for his power, his fortune, and the kind of silence that filled every room before he even spoke. He carried no warmth, only an offer that could save her company and destroy her freedom. In that moment, Samantha didn't know she was standing at the edge of the deal that would change everything, a deal written in cold ink, but sealed by something neither of them believed in any more: love. And that's where her story begins. Rain traced long, silver lines down the glass, each drop breaking the faint glow of the city outside her window. Seattle nights had a way of feeling endless gray, wet, and full of quiet that pressed on the chest. Inside that small second-floor office, Samantha Brooks sat hunched over a pile of case files that no longer mattered. The fluorescent light above her desk flickered, buzzing like an exhausted heartbeat. Coffee had gone cold hours ago. Her fingers, smudged with ink, trembled slightly as she signed another document, one more attempt to keep her father's law firm alive. The sign outside still read, "Brooks & Associates, Family Law since 1978. But the truth was, there was no "and Associates" anymore, only her. And a mountain of debt that grew larger each day her father remained in the hospital. She leaned back in the worn leather chair, the kind that creaked in protest with every movement. The sound filled the room, lonely and familiar. Samantha closed her eyes for a moment, trying to remember the last time she had laughed without thinking about overdue payments or medical bills. Somewhere outside, a bus splashed through puddles, its headlights sweeping across the cracked blinds. The world kept moving. Clients moved on. Friends stopped calling. The phones had been silent for weeks, except for debt collectors who spoke with the kind of politeness that hid sharp teeth. Her father used to say, "A good lawyer stands tall, even in the storm." But tonight, Samantha didn't feel tall. She felt small, like someone forgotten by the city she once believed she could conquer. She stood, walking slowly toward the window. The rain distorted the reflection, staring back at her, a woman in her early 30s, hair tied carelessly, dark circles beneath tired eyes, the kind of face that once held fire but now only showed the smoke left behind. Her gaze drifted toward a photo on the shelf, her father, smiling in a gray suit, hand resting on her shoulder on the day she passed the bar exam. "You'll do great things," he'd said. She had believed him. The phone rang suddenly, sharp and jarring. Her heart jumped. Maybe it was a client. She grabbed the receiver. "Brooks & Associates," she said, forcing warmth into her tone. Silence. Then a male voice, smooth and measured. "Miss Brooks." "Yes." "Who's calling?" "This is from First Western Bank. I'm afraid your loan extension request has been declined." The words fell like a verdict. She closed her eyes, her grip tightening. "I understand," she whispered. After she hung up, she let out a breath that shook on the way out. The quiet returned, heavier than before. She turned off the desk lamp, leaving only the faint orange glow from the street outside. For a long time, she simply stood there listening to the city's hum, the distant horns, the rain whispering against the glass like an old friend trying to comfort her. Her chest ached with the weight of everything unspoken. How much longer could she keep pretending she wasn't breaking? A knock came at the door, 3 firm taps that didn't belong in her world of overdue invoices and fading hope. Samantha hesitated. It was almost midnight. She brushed her hair back, straightened her blazer, and walked to the door. When she opened it, cold air rushed in from the hallway, and standing there tall, composed, with eyes that didn't flinch, was a man she'd only seen in newspapers and television interviews. Gabriel Stone. For a moment, the city noise seemed to fade behind him. His presence filled the small office like a storm entering through a single open window. "Miss Brooks," he said, his voice low, deliberate. "I believe we need to talk." She blinked, unsure whether she should invite him in or close the door and pretend this was some mistake. Gabriel Stone, the CEO of Stone Enterprises. A man whose empire stretched from finance to real estate, whose reputation was built on deals as ruthless as his precision. "What could a man like you possibly want from me?" she asked, her tone sharper than she intended. He studied her for a long second before answering. "A proposal." Samantha almost laughed. "I'm not taking clients right now. I'm not here as a client," he replied, stepping closer, rain glistening on the shoulders of his dark coat. "I'm here to offer you a way out." Her breath caught. The faint scent of rain and cologne lingered between them. He glanced around the dim office, the stacks of unpaid bills, the dying plants, the echo of defeat that hung in the air. "Your firm is collapsing," he said matter-of-factly, "and you're running out of time." Anger flared, bright and brief. "You don't know anything about me." His eyes met hers steady. Unreadable. "On the contrary, Miss Brooks, I know exactly who you are, and I know what you need." The clock ticked loudly behind her, marking every heartbeat she wished would slow. Samantha folded her arms, trying to shield herself from whatever this was. "Then say it." Gabriel took a step forward, his expression calm, almost cold. "Marry me." The words landed like thunder. For a second, Samantha thought she'd misheard him. "What did you just say?" "Marry me," he repeated, his tone unwavering. 2 years. In exchange, I'll clear your debts and keep your father's firm alive." Her throat went dry. She searched his face for any sign of irony, but there was none. Only the certainty of a man used to making impossible offers and having them accepted. "You think you can buy someone's life like a business transaction?" she whispered. His gaze softened. "Barely. No. Miss Brooks, I'm not buying your life. I'm offering you a chance to keep it from falling apart." The rain outside grew heavier, each drop hitting the glass like a warning. Samantha felt her pulse rise, her thoughts tangling between pride and desperation. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the quiet hum of the city and the slow rhythm of her own breathing. Finally, she said, "Get out." Gabriel didn't move. His eyes lingered on hers with something almost human. Then he nodded once, turned, and left without another word. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving the faint scent of rain and expensive cologne in the air. Samantha stood still, her heart pounding. Outside, the storm raged louder, washing the city clean except for her. She pressed a trembling hand against her desk, staring at the closed door, and for the first time that night, a strange thought crossed her mind that maybe the man she'd just told to leave would soon change the course of everything she thought she knew about love, pride, and survival. And somewhere in the echo of that storm, fate had already begun to turn. The door was still trembling from the force of his departure when Samantha realized she hadn't moved for almost a minute. The air he'd left behind still carried his scent, rain, metal, and something sharp, like cedar and control. She should have felt anger, or fear, or at least disbelief that a man like Gabriel Stone had just walked into her failing office and asked her to marry him. But what she felt was silence. A silence that stretched deep inside her, heavy and strange, like the eye of a storm. She sat back down, staring at the papers scattered across her desk. Legal briefs, unpaid bills, a half-written motion for a custody case that no longer mattered. The words blurred into meaningless ink. What kind of person proposed a marriage as a transaction? And what kind of woman would even consider it? She rubbed her temples and laughed under her breath dry, tired, almost bitter. Maybe the kind of woman who was already losing everything. Outside, thunder rolled far away. The clock struck midnight. She should have gone home, but home wasn't much more than an empty apartment with a broken heater and a stack of unopened letters. Here, at least, she could pretend to be working, pretend she still had control. When the second knock came, it was softer, careful, measured. Samantha hesitated, then turned toward the door. The handle moved slightly before she reached it. She opened it. He was there again. Gabriel Stone. As if the night itself had delivered him back to her doorstep. "Miss Brooks," he said quietly. "I realized I may have startled you earlier." "You think?" she answered, voice low. That tends to happen when a stranger walks in and proposes marriage like he's buying real estate. A faint shadow of amusement crossed his eyes. "It's not that different, in some ways." She folded her arms. "You're unbelievable. Perhaps," he said, stepping just inside. "But I'm also your best option right now." The confidence in his tone made her chest tighten. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. He took off his gloves slowly, one at a time, placing them neatly on the edge of her desk. "Let's be honest. You need help. I need a wife. Temporary. 2 years." She almost laughed again, but there was no sound this time, only disbelief. "You're serious? Completely? Why?" He studied her face for a long moment before answering. "Because my board won't approve a major expansion unless they see stability in my personal life. And because your firm," his gaze flicked to the documents on her desk, "is 1 month away from collapse. You're a lawyer, Miss Brooks. You understand contracts. This is a simple one." The rain outside grew heavier, tracing its rhythm against the window like a metronome to her heartbeat. "Simple," she repeated softly. "You think marriage is simple, I think business is," he replied. "Marriage can be treated the same, if both parties agree to the terms." Her throat felt dry. "And what do I get out of this? Business arrangement, your company saved, your father's name preserved, full financial backing for 2 years. After that, we part ways cleanly." Samantha stared at him, the words sinking slowly like stones into deep water. 2 years, salvation, wrapped in humiliation. She walked to the window, staring at the blurry lights of the city. "And if I say no, then you'll lose everything by next month." The bluntness stung. She turned back, her voice shaking with quiet fury. "You really think everyone has a price, don't you?" His eyes didn't waver. "Not everyone. Just those who've run out of choices." That one landed. She looked away, jaw tightening. He reached into his coat and placed a single envelope on the desk. "My offer," he said. "You have until tomorrow night." Then he turned to leave. She wanted to tell him to take his offer and his arrogance and disappear, but her voice wouldn't come. She watched the door close behind him again, the sound soft but final. For a long time, she didn't move. The room felt colder now, the hum of the old heater barely cutting through the chill. She glanced at the envelope. Her fingers itched, but she didn't touch it. She sat down instead, staring at the framed photo of her father. "What would you do, Dad?" she whispered. The photo, of course, didn't answer. Only the rain did steady, relentless, indifferent. Her phone buzzed on the desk. Unknown number. She hesitated before picking up. "Miss Brooks." The voice on the other end was female, calm, professional. "This is Eleanor Wright, personal assistant to Mr. Stone. He asked me to confirm a meeting tomorrow at 9 should you wish to discuss his proposal further." Samantha's stomach turned. "He's very confident I'll say yes." A polite pause. "Mr. Stone doesn't believe in no, Miss Brooks. He believes in negotiation." The line went dead. Samantha stared at the phone for a long moment, then set it down carefully. She stood, walked to the window again, and pressed her forehead lightly against the cool glass. Below, headlights shimmered across the wet street like broken stars. For the first time, she let the weight of everything settle: the debt, the fear, the loneliness that had followed her since the day her father's heart failed, and beneath it all, a flicker of something she couldn't name. Not hope exactly, not yet, but something that made her heart ache differently. She turned off the light, gathered her coat, and stepped out into the rain. The cold bit at her skin, but it kept her awake, alive. She walked the few blocks to her car, her mind echoing with his voice. 2 years, simple. By the time she reached her apartment, her hair was soaked, her shoes heavy with water. She placed the envelope on the kitchen counter without opening it. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and emptiness. She made tea, sat at the small table by the window, and watched the rain blur the city lights. The clock ticked past 1. Her eyes landed on the envelope again. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for it. She told herself she just wanted to look, to understand what kind of man made an offer like this. But when she opened it, the neat, typed pages stared back at her like a mirror. Marriage contract proposal, clear terms, 2 years, confidentiality, financial coverage, termination clauses, and one handwritten note at the bottom. Short, cold, unmistakably his. "You don't have to trust me. Just sign." She let out a shaky breath and leaned back in her chair. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the exhaustion and pride, a small, quiet question rose. What if this is the only way left to save everything I love? The rain eased into a soft drizzle. The city exhaled. Samantha closed her eyes, the faint sound of thunder fading in the distance. Tomorrow, she told herself, she'd decide tomorrow. But in the quiet of that sleepless night, with his words echoing in her mind, she already knew nothing about her life would ever be simple again. Morning light crept through the half-closed blinds of her apartment, painting thin golden lines across the contract that lay open on the kitchen table. The pages looked harmless, just ink and paper, but Samantha knew better. She'd read every word 3 times. Each clause felt like another lock clicking shut. At the bottom, her name waited for her own betrayal. Her hand hovered over the pen for what felt like hours. When the nib finally touched the paper, it wasn't courage that moved her, only exhaustion. The sound of the pen scratching was faint but final. She set it down, staring at the signature that no longer looked like hers. Somewhere in the city, a clock chimed 9, the deal was done. 3 days later, the world knew. Newspapers, business columns, social media feeds all buzzing about the surprise union between Gabriel Stone, the ruthless billionaire, and Samantha Brooks, the unknown attorney from a fading law firm. They called it a modern fairy tale. She called it survival. The wedding was held at the St. Regis Hotel, in a ballroom dripping with gold and glass. Cameras flashed like lightning. The air smelled of roses and perfume and money. Samantha's white gown was perfect, sculpted to fit a dream she didn't have. The veil brushed against her cheeks like a whisper she couldn't quite hear. When she stepped out of the limousine, 1,000 lenses turned toward her. For a moment, she almost forgot how to breathe. A man in a black suit offered his arm. Gabriel, every movement of his was calculated, smooth, deliberate. He looked at her once, expression unreadable, and said quietly, "Smile. They're watching." So she did. A practiced smile that never reached her eyes. Inside, the ceremony moved like a performance. Soft music, polite applause, vows that meant nothing but sounded beautiful. His hand over hers was warm, steady, unfamiliar. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Gabriel leaned in, just close enough for the cameras, and his lips brushed her cheek precisely, formally, without tenderness. The room erupted in applause. Someone shouted, "Perfect couple," and the words echoed painfully in her chest. Later, at the reception, Samantha stood by the marble balcony, looking out over the city. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets gleaming under the lights. Her reflection in the window didn't look like her, too composed, too flawless, like she belonged to someone else's story. Behind her, laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. Powerful people toasted to love and to fortune. She wondered how many of them would still toast if they knew the truth, that the bride had signed a contract instead of a vow, that the groom was rescuing a company, not a heart. Cold feet already. His voice came from behind her. She turned slowly. Gabriel stood a few feet away. Tie loosened, glass of champagne in his hand. Just cold, she replied, wrapping her arms around herself. He studied her, eyes sharp but not unkind. You handled yourself well. The press will adore you. That's a relief, she said softly. At least someone will. Something flickered in his expression gone before she could name it. He set his glass down and took a step closer. This doesn't have to be miserable. Samantha? She looked up at him, searching his face. You think we can fake happiness and just get used to it if we're smart about it? He said. If we both remember why we're here? Her voice lowered. Because you needed a wife, and I needed a lifeline. He didn't argue, only nodded once. The honesty between them was like glass clear, fragile, dangerous. A photographer called their names, and Gabriel placed a hand on her waist, guiding her back toward the crowd. One more picture, he murmured, then you can escape. She let him. The flash went off again and again, freezing them in moments that looked like love. When the guests finally left and the ballroom emptied, she slipped off her shoes, standing barefoot on the marble floor. Her feet ached, her heart, too. Gabriel appeared beside her again, jacket over his arm, ready to go. She nodded. He offered his hand not out of affection, but practicality. She took it anyway. The car ride was quiet. The city glided past, full of light and noise, while inside the limousine, only the faint hum of the engine filled the silence. Samantha stared out the window, watching the raindrops chase one another down the glass. Gabriel's reflection flickered beside hers, calm, distant, unreadable. Tomorrow, he said finally, you'll move into my penthouse. The staff will be briefed. You'll have access to anything you need. Like a well-kept employee, she murmured. He looked at her. Like a partner, he said after a pause. At least in public. She met his gaze, steady now, and in private, his lips curved slightly. But there was no warmth in it. In private, we stay out of each other's way. Samantha nodded. It was easier that way. Cleaner. But as the car pulled up to the stone tower, a sleek building of glass and steel that scraped the clouds, she felt a strange pull in her chest, half dread, half curiosity. The doorman greeted them with practiced reverence. Cameras flashed again as they entered the lobby. By the time the elevator doors closed, the world outside was gone. Just them, inside the mirrored walls. Silence stretched. Samantha caught their reflections her in white satin. Him in a black suit. Together. They looked flawless. But their eyes told different stories. When the doors opened, the penthouse spread out before her like another world. Floor-to-ceiling windows, soft lights, everything too perfect, too expensive, no trace of life, no warmth. She walked across the polished floor, her footsteps echoing. It's beautiful, she said quietly. It's practical, Gabriel corrected. He loosened his tie, placing it neatly on the counter. You'll have your own room, second door on the right. She hesitated. Of course. As she turned to go, his voice stopped her. Samantha? She looked back. He was standing near the window, the city glowing behind him. Whatever you think of me, he said, his tone low. Remember, this was your choice too. Her breath caught. She wanted to argue, to tell him choice didn't feel like this. But she only said, I know. He nodded once, turning away. The conversation was over. She entered her room, closing the door softly behind her. The dress slipped from her shoulders and fell into a white puddle on the floor. She stood there for a long moment, bare feet on cold marble, watching the city through the glass. Somewhere below, a siren wailed, lonely and distant. Samantha lay down on the bed, eyes open to the ceiling. The world thought she'd married for love, but love had nothing to do with this. still. As the rain began again, faint against the window, a thought whispered through her tired mind, quiet, uninvited. Maybe something real could grow even from something false. She exhaled, a slow, trembling breath. And outside, Seattle fell asleep beneath the rain, unaware that two strangers had just bound their lives together, not by destiny, but by paper and pride. The sound of rain returned that night, soft at first, then steady, like the city itself was breathing. The penthouse sat high above the streets, wrapped in glass and silence. The view stretched for miles, yet somehow the room felt small, too bright, too cold. Samantha stood by the window, still wearing the silk robe the housekeeper had left folded on the bed. The hem brushed her knees as she watched the city blur beneath the drizzle. She could see their wedding photos already flashing on news sites, two perfect strangers frozen in a kiss that had never happened. The world saw beauty and success. She saw a cage made of glass. Behind her, the soft click of the door announced Gabriel's return. His footsteps were measured, unhurried. When she turned, he was removing his cufflinks, setting them down one by one on the marble counter. The faint clink of metal was the only sound between them. He looked different without the spotlight, less polished, more human, though the distance in his eyes remained. "You should rest," he said. His voice was calm, even gentle, but it carried authority. The kind that didn't ask it declared. "I'm fine," she replied, keeping her gaze steady. He nodded once, slipping off his jacket. "You don't have to pretend here. We're alone." She almost laughed. Alone doesn't mean safe. That made him pause. For the first time, his composure cracked just a fraction. "Safe," he repeated. Samantha crossed her arms. "You think a contract makes this normal? You think I can just turn off who I am because you've bought my name for 2 years?" The quiet stretched again. He studied her for a long moment, his face unreadable, then said softly, "I didn't buy your name. I gave you a choice." Her jaw tightened. A choice between drowning and signing a deal with the man who pushed me underwater. He took a slow breath, then walked closer. Each step was deliberate, careful, like approaching a wild animal he didn't want to startle. When he stopped a few feet away, the air between them felt charged sharp with pride and something darker, something neither of them wanted to name. "You don't know me, Samantha," he said quietly. "Then why does it feel like you already decided who I am?" He looked at her for a long moment, and in that silence, the storm outside grew louder. Lightning flashed somewhere over the bay, lighting the room in cold white for a heartbeat. When the thunder rolled through seconds later, she whispered, "You may have my signature, Mr. Stone, but my heart isn't part of the deal." Something flickered behind his eyes. Amusement. Maybe, or challenge. "No," he said softly, his tone low and steady. "But one day, you'll beg me not to walk away." Her pulse jumped. Arrogant. "Aren't you realistic?" he replied. For a moment, neither looked away. The rain drummed harder against the glass, a steady rhythm matching her heartbeat. He stood close enough that she could see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. Then, quietly, he stepped back. "Your room is ready," he said. "If you need anything, the staff will handle it." Samantha didn't answer. She turned toward the window again, her reflection merging with his. In the glass, two figures standing in the same room, worlds apart. He left without another word. The sound of the door closing echoed like a line being drawn between them. She stayed there for a long time, watching the lights shimmer below. The city looked alive, full of people laughing, talking, choosing love freely. Her reflection in the glass looked nothing like them. When she finally moved, it was to the piano near the corner of the room. Her father had taught her a few songs when she was little. She lifted the lid, let her fingers rest on the keys, and pressed one softly. The note rang clear, fragile, almost hopeful. The sound carried through the quiet, filling the cold penthouse with something human. Behind her, a voice broke the stillness. I didn't know you played. She turned. Gabriel stood at the edge of the room again, his tie loosened now, his expression unreadable. Barely, she said. It helps me think. He nodded, stepping closer but not too close. Play something. She hesitated, then pressed another key, then another. The melody came slowly hesitant, uneven, but it filled the space like a breath. Gabriel didn't move, just listened. The music softened the room, and for a fleeting moment, it almost felt like peace. When the last note faded, she said quietly, "Do you always make people feel like they owe you their soul?" He smiled faintly, though his eyes looked tired. Only when they try to hide behind pride. Samantha turned toward him fully now. You think pride is my shield? Maybe it's the only thing I have left. Their eyes met, and this time, there was no mockery in his gaze, only something quieter. Harder to name, he said softly. Then keep it, but don't use it to stop living. For a moment, she didn't breathe. He turned, heading for his room. Good night, Mrs. Stone. Her voice followed him, calm but edged with fire. Good night, Mr. Stone. And don't expect me to ever call this home. He stopped at the door, his back still to her. Home, he said, almost to himself, isn't a place. It's the moment you stop fighting it. Then he disappeared down the hallway. Samantha stood there, the echo of his words hanging in the air. The storm outside had eased, leaving behind a hush that felt almost intimate. She walked back to the window, pressing her palm against the cold glass. Somewhere below, thunder grumbled one last time before fading into the distance. Her reflection stared back strong, tired, unbroken. She whispered to it, "You won't beg him. You won't." But even as she said it, something deep inside her shifted, small and silent, like a seed buried beneath frozen ground, waiting, and outside, in the quiet heart of the storm, Seattle slept while two strangers began the slow, inevitable dance that neither of them yet understood. Morning came quietly, gray and heavy, like the sky hadn't quite decided if it wanted to rain again. The city below was already awake horns, footsteps, the hum of traffic rising through the glass walls of the penthouse. Inside, silence ruled. A fragile, uneasy kind of silence, stretched between two people who breathed the same air but stood on opposite sides of something invisible. Samantha woke early, as she always did. It wasn't restlessness, it was survival. She made coffee in the kitchen, the smell filling the vast emptiness of the space. 2 cups, one black, one with cream and a little sugar. She set both on the counter, hesitated, then pushed one toward the other side, his side. It felt strange, leaving something for a man she couldn't understand. When Gabriel entered, his presence filled the room before his voice did. He wore a crisp gray suit, tie perfectly knotted, every line in place. A man made of order and control. "You didn't have to," he said, glancing at the coffee. "I didn't," she replied softly. "Habit?" He lifted the cup anyway. "I take it black." "I know," she murmured. "That's why I left yours untouched." For a second, something flickered across his face. Surprise. Maybe even a trace of respect, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. "You learn fast," he said. "I have to," she replied. "Living here feels like walking a chessboard. One wrong move, and you'll take the queen." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Then don't play games." She smiled faintly. "I think we already are." Their words hovered between them like smoke light, soft, but with the hint of something that could burn. The days that followed were a quiet war. Every morning, he worked from his study, the door always half open. She could hear his voice through the phone, firm, precise, commanding. People listened when Gabriel Stone spoke. Everyone did, everyone except her. She refused to disappear into the background, even if this marriage was nothing more than a contract. She cooked her own meals, used the library instead of the guest lounge, and filled the penthouse with small traces of herself, an old mug from her father's office, a vase of fresh lilies by the window, soft music that played while she read. Each of these tiny acts to Gabriel felt like rebellion. To her, they were survival. One evening, as the rain began again, she found him in the study, surrounded by papers and silence. "You forgot dinner," she said from the doorway. "I'm not hungry. You say that every night." He didn't look up, then stop asking. She walked closer, the carpet muffling her steps. "You can order me around in public, Mr. Stone, but in this house, I'm not one of your employees." That made him stop. His pen froze mid-sentence. Slowly, he raised his eyes to hers. "And what are you?" Then, "The woman you chose to marry," she said calmly. "Even if it was for convenience, that title deserves respect." He leaned back, studying her. The silence stretched, but she didn't look away. Finally, he said, "You mistake distance for disrespect. Then maybe try showing me the difference." Something changed in his gaze then, not anger, not admiration, but a kind of reluctant acknowledgement. She was no longer the desperate lawyer signing papers in the dark. She was standing tall, meeting him head on. He closed the folder slowly, stood, and walked toward her. "You really don't know when to back down, do you?" "Not when I'm right." He was close now. Too close. She could see the faint tension in his jaw, the way his pulse flickered near his collar. "You think this is a fight you can win?" he asked quietly. She didn't move. "I'm not trying to win. I'm trying not to disappear." The words hung there, heavier than either of them expected. For a long second, they just stared at each other, two storms meeting halfway, neither willing to break. Then Gabriel stepped back, exhaled, and said, "Dinner?" Then, her heart was still pounding when she followed him to the dining room. The table stretched long and gleaming, meant for 20 guests, but holding only 2 plates. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass, reflections dancing across the polished surface. They ate in near silence, the soft clink of silverware filling the air. At one point, he said, almost to himself, "You're not what I expected." She looked up. "And what did you expect?" He hesitated, someone who'd follow orders. She smiled faintly. "Then you married the wrong woman." His lips curved, just a little. "Maybe the right one." The words came out so quietly she almost thought she'd imagined them. Later that night, Samantha stood alone on the balcony. The wind lifted strands of her hair, cool against her face. From here, the city looked endless, alive. And yet she'd never felt so trapped. And still, beneath the ache of distance, there was something else, an energy she couldn't quite name. Behind her, Gabriel's reflection appeared in the glass. "You should come inside," he said. "I like the rain." She murmured. "So do I," he said, stepping beside her. "It reminds me not everything can be controlled." She turned, surprised by the honesty in his tone. He was looking out at the city, not at her. For once, he seemed almost human-tired, thoughtful, a man who carried too many secrets. "Do you ever stop fighting?" she asked quietly. He gave a small, humorless laugh. "I wouldn't know how. Maybe you should learn." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain fell harder, a rhythm steady and soft. Then he said, "If I did, what would I be?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Free." He looked at her then. Really looked like he was seeing her for the first time. The sound of thunder rolled somewhere far away, a low, slow heartbeat that filled the space between them. Neither of them moved, neither of them surrendered. But in that stillness, something shifted. Not peace, not yet, but understanding thin, fragile, and real. Samantha turned back toward the city. Her reflection shimmered beside his. In the glass, 2 figures standing shoulder to shoulder, both trapped and untamed. And as the storm continued its quiet song, she realized the truth. This wasn't just a contract anymore. It was a battlefield. And somewhere between pride and longing, The first spark of something dangerously human had begun to burn. The morning light had barely touched the skyline when Samantha's phone began to vibrate. First once, then again, then it didn't stop. The sound filled the quiet kitchen like an alarm she couldn't silence. She reached for it, still half asleep, coffee cup trembling in her hand. The screen was flooded with messages, names she didn't recognize, numbers without faces, words that burned before she could even finish reading them. Cheater, disgrace, gold digger. Her heart dropped. She clicked on one of the links. A photograph appeared, grainy, overexposed, but clear enough to wound. It was her, or at least it looked like her, standing in the lobby of some hotel, head tilted toward a man whose face was half hidden, their hands brushed. His smile was suggestive. The headline screamed betrayal in bold letters. The CEO's wife caught in secret affair. Her breath caught somewhere between her chest and throat. She whispered, "No, that's not real." But the internet didn't care about real. It cared about noise. Within hours, the storm grew. News anchors spoke her name with mock concern. Comment sections dripped with venom. Cameras gathered outside the stone tower, their flashes like lightning, relentless and cruel. By the time Gabriel came downstairs, she was standing in the living room, pale, frozen, the TV screen glowing behind her. The photo filled the space between them, silent proof of a lie. He looked at it once, then at her. "When did this start?" "I woke up to it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's fake. Gabriel, I swear." He didn't answer right away, just stared at the screen, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. Then, quietly, he said, "Pack your things. We're leaving." "Leaving?" "They're already outside," he said, glancing toward the window. "I'm not letting them touch you." She hesitated. "You don't believe me." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." He turned toward her then, his voice sharper. "Do you really think I'd let the world destroy my wife based on a photo?" The word "my wife" hit her harder than his tone. He didn't wait for her reply. He was already moving coat, phone, keys efficient, decisive, a man trained to take control of chaos. When they stepped into the elevator, she could already hear the crowd outside, shouts, questions, the metallic click of cameras. Her heart pounded against her ribs. The doors opened to a wall of noise and flashing lights. "Mrs. Stone, is it true? Who's the man in the picture? Did your husband know?" The voices came from every direction. She felt hands, microphones, the press of bodies. The panic rose fast, choking her. Then she felt his hand on her arm firm, steady. Gabriel pulled her close, shielding her with his body as they pushed through the chaos. His voice was low, controlled. "Keep your head down." The security team tried to clear a path, but the photographers were relentless. Someone shouted, "She's hiding her face," and then, all at once, he stopped, turned, faced them. The cameras exploded in light. He tightened his grip around her waist, pulling her against him. "You want a statement?" he said, voice cold enough to still the crowd. "Here it is." He looked directly into the nearest lens, his tone cutting through the storm. "She's my wife. Anyone who comes after her comes after me." The world seemed to stop for a heartbeat. The noise faded into silence. The only sound left was the rain beginning to fall again, soft and slow. Then he guided her into the car, slamming the door behind them. Inside, the quiet felt almost unreal. Samantha sat still, her pulse still racing. Gabriel's jaw was tight, his hand gripping the edge of the seat. She whispered, "You didn't have to do that." He turned to her, eyes sharp. "Yes, I did. Now they'll think you're defending me because of pride. Not because—" She stopped herself. He watched her carefully. Because of what she shook her head. Never mind. The car moved through the city, streets wet and glistening under the rain. Every few seconds, the flash of a camera followed them, reflections bouncing off the glass. She pressed her hand to her chest, trying to steady her breath. "I don't know who did this," she said finally, voice trembling. But they want to hurt you. Through me? I know, he said simply. You sound sure. Because it's how power works. They can't touch me directly. So they go for the one thing that looks fragile. She looked out the window. Then they don't know me? He turned slightly, studying her profile. No, he said quietly. They don't. For a moment, the storm outside felt distant. Inside the car, everything slowed, the hum of the tires, the soft rhythm of the rain. She could feel his gaze linger, not with suspicion, but something else. Something careful. Back at the tower, security tightened. Phones were confiscated. Statements were drafted. His PR team filled the office, whispering strategies and damage control. Through it all, Samantha sat in the corner, silent, watching the man who had just publicly defended her reputation like it was his own. He gave orders in short, clipped sentences. He didn't raise his voice once. When he was done, the room cleared, leaving only them. She said softly, "You didn't have to risk that." He looked up. "If I didn't, they would have eaten you alive." "Still," she said, "it's not your job to protect me." He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing slightly. "It is now?" She opened her mouth to protest, but something in his tone stopped her. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't cold, just heavy with things unsaid. "Finally," she said, "you stood there and told the world I was your wife, like it meant something." He met her gaze. It did. Samantha swallowed hard, unsure if he meant it as a line or a truth neither of them wanted to admit. Outside, the storm raged on. Cameras still waited below. But for the first time, she felt something strange in the quiet, a fragile kind of safety, tucked inside the chaos. As she stood to leave, Gabriel's voice followed her, low and certain. "Samantha," he said, "whoever did this, they'll regret it." She paused by the door. "You sound like a man declaring war." He looked at her, eyes steady. "That's because I am." She didn't reply, only nodded once and walked away, her heartbeat matching the rhythm of the rain. And in that moment, beneath the noise of a world ready to tear her apart, she realized something had changed. He wasn't just her husband on paper anymore. He had chosen a side, and it was hers. But in choosing her, he just made both of them targets. The elevator doors closed behind them with a heavy click, sealing away the last flashes of the cameras. Inside the mirrored walls, Gabriel stood perfectly still. His reflection looked calm, but his knuckles were white against the metal railing. Samantha could feel the tension rolling off him like heat. He hadn't said a word since they'd left the press conference. The silence pressed on her chest harder than the noise outside ever did. When the elevator finally reached the penthouse, he stepped out first. No words, no glance back, just long strides and anger disguised as control. She followed slowly. Every sound amplified the soft thud of her heels, the faint hum of the city below, the rhythmic echo of her heartbeat in her ears. In the living room, the air felt thick, like the storm hadn't ended but moved inside with them. Gabriel stood by the window, back turned, hands gripping the edge of the glass table. Rain streaked down the windows, painting shadows across his face. "Say something," she said quietly. He didn't move. "What do you want me to say? That you believe me?" He turned then, his eyes dark, sharp with something that wasn't quite anger but close. "I stood in front of the world and defended you, Samantha. I risked everything I built to silence those vultures. I didn't ask you to." "No," he said, stepping closer. "But you didn't stop me either." Her throat tightened. "Because I didn't want to see you hurt." His jaw clenched. "Hurt. You think this is about me?" The air between them snapped, charged. He took another step, close enough that she could see the storm in his eyes, raw, unguarded, dangerous. "Do you have any idea what it's like to see your name tied to mine in headlines like that? To see people doubt everything because of one photo?" She met his gaze, steady and proud. "I know exactly what it's like. I was the one they called a liar, a fraud. You'll survive this?" I might not. He froze at that, just long enough for her to see the flicker of guilt cross his face. Then he exhaled, low and hard, running a hand through his hair. Damn it. Samantha? For a moment, neither spoke. The rain hit the glass harder now, a steady rhythm that matched the pulse rising between them. When he looked at her again, his voice was quieter but not softer. That man in the photo. Who was he, I told you? I don't know him. It's a fabrication. Then why do I still feel? He stopped, biting back the words. Feel what she pressed. He looked away, his hands curling at his sides. Jealous. The word landed between them like thunder. Samantha stared at him, unsure if she'd heard right. Jealous. He laughed once, bitter and low. Ridiculous. Isn't it? I don't even believe in love. And yet one fake photo was enough to. He stopped again, shaking his head. She took a small step closer, her voice trembling just enough to betray her. Enough to what? Gabriel. He turned toward her then. Eyes fierce, voice rough. Enough to make me want to find whoever touched you even in a lie and destroy them. For a heartbeat, neither breathed. Then he closed the distance between them in one swift motion. His hand found the back of her neck, pulling her closer, his mouth on hers before she could think or speak. The kiss wasn't gentle, it was fire, unfiltered and consuming. It wasn't about desire, it was about fear, about losing control, about wanting something too much and not knowing how to name it. Samantha froze at first, every muscle taut, her heartbeat crashing in her ears. Then something inside her broke open a flood of confusion, of anger, of something dangerously close to need. She pushed against him once, weakly, but he didn't move away. His hand slid to her jaw, holding her still, his breath warm against her skin. When she finally pulled back, her voice was barely a whisper. You can't do that. He stared at her, breathing hard, eyes wild. Why not? Because you don't get to take what you can't give. Silence. Only the rain answered, softer now, as if the storm outside was catching its breath too. He stepped back slowly, his chest still rising and falling. You think I don't care, he said, voice low. You think this is just a game to me. Her eyes glistened, though she refused to let the tears fall. I think you don't know what you feel, and I'm not going to be the experiment that teaches you. He closed his eyes briefly, as if trying to steady himself. When he opened them, the fire was still there but behind it. Something else. Something raw. You drive me insane, he whispered. Every word, every look. I can't decide if I want to hold you or run from you. She gave a small, shaky laugh. Then maybe do both. I'm not yours to fix. Gabriel? He didn't reply, just stared at her for a long moment, as if memorizing something he didn't have the right to keep. Then he said softly, maybe not. But you are the first person who's ever made me feel like I could break. The confession hung there, fragile and dangerous. Samantha turned away, pressing her hand against the cool glass. The city lights blurred into gold and gray. Her reflection looked strange, flushed, trembling. Alive in a way she hadn't been in years. She whispered, more to herself than to him, I don't know if I hate you or if I'm starting to. She didn't finish the sentence. Couldn't. Behind her, Gabriel's voice came quiet, almost tender. You don't have to know. Then he walked away, leaving her with the echo of his words and the ghost of his touch still burning on her lips. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city exhaled, and in the stillness, Samantha stood alone, torn between fury and longing, realizing that somewhere in the chaos of lies and pride, something far more dangerous had begun to grow, something neither of them could control. The rain had stopped that morning, but the sky was still heavy with clouds, low and gray over Seattle. Samantha sat by the window in Gabriel's penthouse, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. The city below moved as if nothing had happened. Cars, people, umbrellas crossing streets. But inside her, something was unsettled. Since that night, the night Gabriel kissed her, she hadn't been able to breathe the same way. Every thought of him came with a strange ache, a mix of anger and something dangerously close to longing. She told herself it meant nothing. It was just the chaos of everything falling apart around them. She told herself a lot of things lately. The doorbell broke the silence. A soft chime, almost polite. She wasn't expecting anyone. The housekeeper had the day off, and Gabriel was out for meetings. Samantha set the cup down and walked slowly to the door. Through the small glass pane, she saw him. A familiar face from a life she thought she'd buried. Ethan Ward. Her breath caught. When she opened the door, he smiled, the same charming smile that once could undo her. But now, all she felt was the chill. "Samantha," he said, voice smooth, too familiar. "You look incredible. Marriage must suit you." She didn't move aside. "What are you doing here? Relax." He raised his hands as if to show peace. "I just wanted to talk. An old friend stopping by. That's all. Friends don't show up uninvited after 3 years of silence." He chuckled, eyes drifting around the luxurious hallway behind her. "You've done well. Stone Enterprises. Huh, must be nice. Living up here above the clouds." "Say what you came to say," she snapped. Ethan's smile shifted, sharper now. He reached into his coat and pulled out a manila envelope. "I think you'll want to see these." Samantha hesitated, then took it. Inside were photos printed, glossy, cruel. Her image again. The same faked intimacy, the same fabricated betrayal, only this time worse. Different angles, different lies. Her throat tightened. "You did this." He didn't deny it. "I had help. People like stories. Sam, especially when they look real enough." Why he stepped closer? His cologne faint but familiar, stirring memories she didn't want. "Because I remember how you left me. You made me look like the bad guy. Maybe I was, but I don't like unfinished business." Samantha's voice dropped. "You tried to ruin me once. You're not doing it again." "Oh, I think I am," he said, almost kindly. "Unless you help me." She folded her arms, forcing steadiness into her voice. "What do you want? Simple information, access, a few internal files from Stone Enterprises, nothing that will hurt the company long term. Just enough to make some noise. You're his wife. You can get them." Her jaw tightened. "And if I don't," Ethan leaned in, his voice turning soft, poisonous. "Then the world gets a new batch of photos. Better ones, and maybe even a few videos. You know how easy it is to fake those now." Her stomach turned. "You're blackmailing me. Let's call it balance." She took a step back. "Get out!" He tilted his head. "You might want to think before you say that. Gabriel Stone's reputation is built on control. What happens when he sees proof, fake or not, that his perfect wife is the one bringing him down?" The air in the room thickened. For a moment, Samantha couldn't speak. The threat wasn't just cruel, it was calculated. He knew exactly where to strike. "Finally," she whispered, "you really haven't changed." "No," Ethan said softly, "but you have. You look stronger. It's almost a shame." She slammed the door before he could say another word. Her hands were shaking. The photos slipped from her fingers, scattering across the floor like fallen truths. For a long moment, she just stood there, breathing hard, trying to calm the panic rising in her chest. Her mind raced. Gabriel couldn't see those. Not yet. Not until she figured out who else was behind this. When she finally picked up the envelope, her reflection in the glass caught her eye. She looked like someone she didn't recognize, harder, colder, afraid but hiding it well. A sound from the hallway made her freeze. Gabriel's voice. He was home early. "Samantha." His footsteps grew closer. "You're pale." What happened? She turned, clutching the envelope behind her back. Nothing. Just a delivery mix-up. He studied her. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in concern. "You're shaking." "I'm fine." She lied, forcing a smile, "just tired." He stepped closer, searching her face. "You're lying." Her breath hitched. "Don't," he said softly. "Not to me." Something in his tone made her want to tell him everything, but the memory of Ethan's smirk stopped her cold. Gabriel's trust was fragile, too new, too easily broken. She shook her head. "Please, just let it go." He didn't press. Instead, he reached out and touched her cheek, the gesture unexpected, gentle. "Whatever it is, you don't have to handle it alone." She forced herself to hold his gaze. "I know," but when he left the room, she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Her pulse thudded like a warning in her chest. Ethan wasn't just back to haunt her, he was planning something bigger, and she knew that whatever game he was playing, it wasn't over. Outside, the clouds thickened again, dark and heavy. The rain began to fall, slow at first, then harder. Each drop hit the window like a countdown. Samantha stared at the envelope still in her hand. Inside, the lies waited, dangerous, convincing, alive. She whispered to herself. Not this time. But deep down, she knew Ethan wasn't just coming for her reputation. He was coming for Gabriel's empire, and the storm he carried would make everyone before it look small. Gabriel found out before she could decide whether to tell him. He always did. There were no secrets in his world, not for long. That night, when he walked into the penthouse, his face was pale with fury, the kind that didn't shout it, burned quietly, like fire behind glass. Samantha knew instantly that he knew. The envelope was gone from her desk, the one she thought she'd hidden well enough. He stood by the window, city lights flickering over his face, his voice low and tight. "When were you planning to tell me?" Her throat closed. It wasn't what it looked like. "Ethan Ward contacted you," he said, cutting her off. "You let him in? I didn't let him in. He showed up. You should have called me. I didn't want to make it worse." He turned sharply, eyes flashing. "You think keeping me in the dark helps either of us? That man is a parasite. He's been circling me for years, waiting for a weakness. And now you think I'm that weakness?" She shot back. He froze, then looked at her. Really looked. His expression softened for a heartbeat, enough for her to see the worry beneath the anger. "No," he said quietly. "You're the only thing keeping me from losing my mind right now." Silence. The words hung between them, heavier than the air itself. He walked past her, phone already in hand, voice shifting into something cold, professional. "I want every record on Ethan Ward financials, travel, calls. I don't care how deep you have to dig." His assistant's muffled reply echoed faintly through the phone. Gabriel ended the call and set it down with deliberate calm. "Gabriel," Samantha began, "whatever you're planning." He turned toward her, eyes sharp. "I'm not planning, I'm fixing." She stepped closer, fixing or destroying. Sometimes they're the same thing. He moved to the bar, poured himself a drink, but didn't touch it. His hands were shaking. It was the first time she'd seen that. "You don't understand," he said, almost to himself. "He's dangerous, not just to you, to everything I've built." She exhaled slowly. "Then let me help." That made him look at her again, disbelief flickering across his face. "Help Samantha. You're the reason he's here." Her voice broke a little. "And I'm also the reason he doesn't have what he wants." I said no. Something in his expression shifted again. Guilt, maybe, or realization. He took a step toward her, the anger still there but tempered now, replaced by something deeper. "He threatened you, didn't he?" She hesitated. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me," he said firmly. She met his eyes, quiet but defiant. "What are you going to do? Gabriel, scare him. Pay him off. You can't solve everything by control." He gave a small, humorless laugh. "Watch me." That night, he disappeared into his office, Calls were made, meetings arranged. By morning, Ethan Ward's name had vanished from every corner of the internet. His accounts were frozen, his company under investigation, his reputation quietly shredded. Gabriel's methods were invisible but absolute. When he finally returned home the next evening, Samantha was waiting in the living room, arms crossed. "You did this." He loosened his tie, exhaustion shadowing his face. "He won't bother you again." Her chest tightened. "You went too far." "I didn't go far enough." His voice was rough, frayed. "You don't know the kind of people he's tied to." If he had gotten those files, if he'd sold them, he stopped, catching himself. "You were protecting your company," she said quietly. He met her gaze, and in that moment, she saw something unguarded. "I was protecting you." The words caught her off guard. For a second, neither moved. The city hummed quietly beyond the glass. "You think I can't protect myself," she said, softer now. "I think you shouldn't have to." He reached out, hesitated, then brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch was light, almost uncertain, and it made her heart stumble in her chest. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. Not anymore. She wanted to tell him that she didn't need saving, that she hated how easily he made her feel seen and small at the same time. But his eyes, the way they held fear and care and something too close to love, made the words fade before they reached her lips. "Gabriel," she whispered. "Why does it matter so much?" He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "Because for the first time in a very long time, I'm afraid." "Of what?" "Of losing something I didn't even know I wanted." Her breath caught. She didn't know how to respond to that. Instead, she just stood there, staring at him, her pulse racing faster than her thoughts. He took a step back, as if realizing he'd said too much. "You should get some rest," he said, his voice low again, controlled. But the control didn't quite hold. His hand brushed hers as he turned away, lingering just a second longer than necessary. Samantha watched him leave the room, her heart aching with a strange mixture of warmth and confusion. When the door closed, she walked to the window, looking down at the city lights below. The reflection of her face shimmered against the glass, but behind it, she could almost see him, his silhouette, his quiet strength, and the vulnerability he'd tried so hard to hide. She pressed her fingers lightly against the glass, whispering to the empty room, "You're not as cold as you want to be." And somewhere deep down, she knew she wasn't as untouchable as she pretended either. Outside, the rain began again, soft and steady, washing the city clean. But inside, the air still carried the trace of something raw, something just beginning to bloom in the cracks between fear and tenderness. And though neither of them said it aloud, both could feel it. The battle between them had changed. It wasn't about pride anymore. It was about love. And love, she was beginning to realize, could be the most dangerous war of all. It was raining again, the kind of rain that blurred the city into soft streaks of silver and gray. Samantha stood by the window of the penthouse, watching the lights fade in the distance, one by one, swallowed by the storm. Gabriel was still at the office. He'd called an hour ago to say he'd be home soon. His voice had been steady, tired but calm, nothing unusual. But somehow, tonight felt wrong. The air was heavy, too still. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. When the phone rang, she almost didn't answer. It wasn't his number, just an unknown line flashing across the screen. She picked it up anyway. A man's voice, quick and urgent, cut through the static. "Mrs. Stone. This is Harborview Hospital. There's been an accident. Your husband, he's alive, but you need to come now." The cup in her hand fell, shattering across the marble floor. The next thing she remembered was the sound of sirens, the blur of city lights flashing red and white through rain-smeared glass. Her hands were clenched so tight around her purse that her knuckles burned. Every thought in her head dissolved into one word: please. When she reached the hospital, the world had narrowed to the echo of her own footsteps. The smell of antiseptic hung in the air, sharp and sterile. A nurse led her down a hallway that felt endless. The rain tapped faintly against the windows, matching the rhythm of her heartbeat, fast, uneven, desperate. When she saw him, she stopped breathing. Gabriel lay motionless beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. Tubes, wires, machines. Everything she'd ever feared wrapped around him. His skin was too pale, his lips colorless. The strong hands that once commanded rooms now rested weakly on the sheets. The doctor's voice faded into the background. Something about brakes failing, impact, blood loss. She didn't hear most of it. All she could see was the rise and fall of his chest, barely there, but still there. When the doctor left, she moved closer, slowly, afraid to touch him. Her hands hovered over his, trembling. Then, finally, she took it. His palm was cold, but it was his. "Gabriel," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You can't do this. Not now." The room hummed softly with the sound of machines. She leaned closer, her tears falling onto the sheets. "Do you hear me? You don't get to walk into my life, turn everything upside down, and then just leave." Her words came out in small, broken pieces, like the breath she was trying to hold. "You don't get to protect me and then disappear. You don't get to scare me like this." A nurse came in briefly to check the monitors, her face gentle but unreadable. "He's stable for now," she said. "Talk to him. They say hearing familiar voices helps." When they left her alone again, she sat down, still holding his hand. For the first time since they met, she saw him not as the man who built empires, but as someone human, fragile, breakable. She remembered the way he'd stood in front of the cameras, shielding her from the world, the way his voice softened when he thought she wasn't listening, the way his anger always hid something he didn't know how to say. She whispered softly, "You once told me you don't believe in love. Maybe I didn't either. But this is what it feels like to be afraid of losing it." Her thumb brushed against his wrist. His pulse was faint. But there. "Gabriel," she said again, her voice trembling, "if you can hear me, you have to fight. You don't get to leave before I tell you that I—" She stopped. The word hung there, too heavy, too fragile. "That I need you." A long silence followed, the kind that feels like it could last forever. She laid her head on the edge of the bed, still holding his hand. The machines beeped steadily beside her, the rhythm strangely comforting. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, distant but deep, for hours. She didn't move. Nurses came and went, checking monitors, adjusting IVs. But she stayed. Every time a machine beeped differently, her heart jumped. Every time it steadied again, she whispered thank you. In the quiet moments between, she remembered things: his laugh, rare but real, the way he'd looked at her the night of the press storm, not with pride, but fear, the way he'd said, "You're the only thing keeping me from losing my mind." She hadn't believed him then. She did now. The night stretched on. At some point, exhaustion took over. She drifted half asleep, her fingers still entwined with his. Her dreams were fragments: rain, headlights, the echo of his voice saying her name. When she woke, dawn was beginning to touch the edge of the sky. The rain had stopped. The first light slipped through the blinds, soft and gray. She looked at him, still unmoving, still caught between two worlds. And she felt something in her chest she hadn't dared to feel before: hope. Leaning forward, she pressed her lips against his hand, her whisper barely more than breath. "You don't get to leave me, Gabriel Stone. Not when I've finally stopped running from what this is." Her eyes closed, her forehead resting against his hand. "You don't get to go. Not now, not ever." The monitors continued their steady beeping. The light grew brighter. Somewhere deep within the rhythm of the machines, she thought maybe she felt his fingers twitch. It might have been her imagination, or it might have been the first sign that the man she thought she'd lost was still fighting his way back to her. And for the first time in her life, Samantha Brooks prayed not for strength, not for justice, but simply for one thing: that he would open his eyes, The room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the occasional beep marking each pulse of his heart. Samantha sat beside Gabriel's bed, her hand clutched in his. His skin was still pale, his breathing shallow. The night had stretched long, and her body ached from hours of holding vigil, leaning over him, willing him to wake. The city outside had gone dark, lights fading under the mist of a gentle drizzle. Inside, the hospital's sterile white walls felt intimate and fragile, like a cocoon, isolating them from the world. She stroked his hair back from his forehead, careful not to disturb the monitors. "Please," she whispered, voice trembling. "Don't leave me. Not now." A soft movement stirred beneath her fingers. His eyes fluttered open, glassy and uncertain. For a moment, they weren't focusing, drifting somewhere between the dream of the night and the harsh reality of the room. Then, slowly, awareness returned. His gaze locked on hers. "Don't go," he said, voice rough, weak, barely audible over the monitors. Tears pricked her eyes. She gripped his hand tighter, leaning closer, letting herself feel the fear she had tried to hold back. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered, the words steady even as her chest shook. "I promise. You're not alone." He blinked slowly, each movement deliberate, fragile. "You stayed." "Every second," she said. Her fingers traced the lines of his hand, memorizing the warmth, the pulse, the life in it. "I couldn't leave you." Gabriel's lips twitched, a faint shadow of a smile, and yet his eyes held something deeper vulnerability she had never allowed herself to see before. The man who had commanded rooms, ruled companies, and tamed worlds now seemed small, human, dependent. He started, voice faltering. "I didn't think." She shook her head gently, brushing her thumb along his knuckles. You don't have to explain. Just be here. That's enough." A long silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the beeping machines. Samantha felt her own walls crumble in that quiet. No pride, no pretense, no contract. Just two people, raw and fragile, holding on to each other in the middle of a storm neither could control. "Your hand," he whispered again, tightening his grip around hers, feeble but real. "Don't leave me." Her tears fell freely now, hot and unrestrained. She leaned closer, resting her forehead against his, breathing in the faint scent of antiseptic in him, mingled and real. "I'm not leaving," she said softly. "Not now, not ever." His eyelids drooped again, exhaustion overtaking the faint strength he had mustered. She stayed close, letting her hand rest over his heart, feeling its fragile rhythm. Every beat was a reminder he was here, he was alive, and she couldn't imagine a world without him. For hours, she whispered small things, trivial things, stories from the past, memories, quiet confessions meant only for him. Her voice became the anchor in a room suspended between fear and relief. She laughed softly when he murmured something incoherent, cried when he winced from pain, held him when he shivered beneath the blankets. And in that shared vulnerability, the walls between them began to dissolve. The ice Gabriel had built around himself, the impenetrable composure, the cold authority melted slowly, revealing a man who loved, feared, and needed in ways he had never admitted. Samantha let herself feel it too, the truth she had kept buried behind pride and distance. She was terrified of losing him, not just tonight, but forever. Her heart thumped wildly in her chest as she pressed closer, whispering his name, letting herself acknowledge the depths of what she felt. I can't lose you," she admitted aloud for the first time, voice small but fierce. "Not like this. Not ever." He squeezed her hand, weakly but insistently, his eyes meeting hers with a depth that took her breath away. Then, "Don't go," he whispered again, softer this time. Almost a plea. Samantha's tears streamed freely. "I won't," she promised. "I won't leave you. You're mine now, not in contracts, not in duty, but in everything I am. The monitors beeped steadily, a rhythmic reassurance. Outside, dawn was beginning to filter through the blinds, soft, pale, forgiving. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean, but inside, the storm of fear, love, and vulnerability lingered, thick and real. Samantha leaned her head against his shoulder, closing her eyes, letting herself cry and breathe and finally surrender to the truth. She was no longer the cold, guarded woman who signed contracts to survive. She was someone who could love, who could fear, who could be completely vulnerable. And Gabriel, weak and fragile in her arms, held onto her just as fiercely. For the first time, they were no longer husband and wife in name only. They were two hearts, beating together, fragile and real, suspended in a moment neither wanted to end. She whispered once more, her lips close to his ear, "Stay with me. Please, don't leave me." And in the quiet hum of the hospital room, for the first time, Gabriel's ice had truly begun to melt. The morning light crept softly through the blinds, spilling onto the floor in thin golden lines. Samantha moved quietly through the penthouse, careful not to wake Gabriel. His breathing was even now, stronger than the night before, and for the first time, the sight of him lying there made her heart swell with something she couldn't name. She placed a cup of coffee on the bedside table, the warm aroma curling around the room, and watched him stir. His eyes opened slowly, still tired, still raw with vulnerability, and when he saw her, a small, almost shy smile crossed his face. "Good morning," she whispered, brushing a loose strand of hair from his forehead. "Morning," he said, voice rough but softer than it had ever been. "You didn't sleep? I wanted to see you wake," she admitted. "It feels strange, not knowing if you'll be here." He reached out, gripping her hand lightly. "I'm here," he said, the words simple but carrying weight. Those first days of recovery became a rhythm of closeness neither had anticipated. Samantha woke early to make breakfast, watched him carefully as he navigated small exercises, helped him steady himself during physical therapy sessions. She laughed when he grumbled about stretching routines, teased him about his stubbornness, and, occasionally, he allowed a chuckle to escape, rare but genuine. Evenings were quieter. They sat with mugs of tea, fingers brushing over the edge of the cup, sharing stories in low voices. She watched him learn to release some of the control he carried like armor, letting her organize small aspects of his life, teaching him that letting go didn't mean weakness. There were arguments, too gentle ones, like waves pressing against the shore. He would challenge her about trivial things, the placement of a book, the way she measured his portions, the order of his schedule, and she would retaliate, refusing, questioning, pushing back. Each clash ended in laughter, sometimes frustration, always a trace of understanding, of boundaries shifting. One morning, as she helped him balance during a walking exercise, he grunted, swaying slightly. "I hate this," he muttered, the embarrassment flickering across his face. "You'll survive," she teased. "Besides, you agreed to let me be in charge for once." He looked at her then, eyes soft, and shook his head with a small smile. "I guess I'm learning humility," he said, tone playful but edged with gratitude. Samantha laughed, the sound bright in the sunlit room. Slowly, "Gabriel, you're not used to losing control." By afternoon, he was stronger. He could sit unaided, could pour his own cup of coffee, could reach across the table without trembling. And every time he accomplished something, she felt a spark, a small flame lighting between them. Not passion alone, but trust, intimacy, the slow burn of understanding and companionship. One day, as they sorted through documents together, she accidentally knocked a pen off the desk. He leaned over, reaching for it, and their hands touched. His grip lingered just slightly, and her heart skipped a beat. He caught her eyes, and for a brief moment, the world outside the penthouse didn't exist, only the warmth of a hand, the quiet acknowledgement of shared closeness. Later, during a quiet dinner, She noticed the faint scars along his forearm, remnants of his accident. She reached out, tracing them softly with her fingertip. "You're healing," she whispered, almost to herself. "I am," he said, voice low, catching hers with a gaze that was both tender and intense. "And I'm learning to let go." She smiled, unsure if he meant of pride, fear, or the need to always protect. "Good," she said simply. "You deserve it." As the days turned into weeks, the penthouse became a home. Their mornings were ritualized, filled with the aroma of coffee and the clatter of dishes. Their afternoons held laughter, teasing, and the gentle friction of two strong wills negotiating closeness. Evenings stretched long, conversations soft, punctuated with small gestures, a brush of a hand, a shared smile, a quiet glance that spoke volumes. They argued sometimes, laughed more often, and slowly. Unguarded moments crept in his hand on her shoulder, her head leaning against his chest. Comfortable silence that felt like safety. One night, after a particularly challenging therapy session, they collapsed on the couch, shoulders touching, the room dark except for the soft glow of the city outside. "You've changed," she whispered. He turned his head, surprised. "Me?" "Yes," she said, fingers tracing the edge of his sleeve. "You've let someone in, and I think I'm letting you in, too." He closed his eyes briefly, breathing her words in. "I didn't know I could," he admitted. "Not like this. Not without the walls." "Then maybe it's time the walls came down," she suggested softly. For the first time, he didn't resist. His hand found hers, fingers entwining. "Maybe they should," he said, voice low, vulnerable, yet steady. Samantha leaned closer, their foreheads touching, laughter and warmth mingling with the quiet hum of the city. The scars on his arms, the aches in his body, the remnants of fear, they all seemed to matter less now, replaced by a raw, enduring connection. And in that simple, ordinary moment, amid coffee cups and quiet laughter, she realized that love didn't need grand gestures. It grew in small, persistent ways in care, in patience, in the willingness to show fragility and still stay. For the first time, Samantha felt it clearly, they were more than husband and wife in name. They were partners navigating the aftermath of chaos, learning to trust, to laugh, to argue, and to love in a way that was authentic, unguarded, and steady. The city lights twinkled beyond the window, reflected softly on the polished surfaces. She pressed her hand to his, squeezing gently. "You're healing," she said again. "And so are you," he replied, turning his gaze toward her, eyes warm, unshielded, and in the quiet glow of that evening, Samantha knew that whatever storms had passed, and whatever trials remained, the fire between them had begun to burn for real, steady, persistent, and true. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting warm, dancing shadows across the penthouse living room. Outside, the city slept beneath a quiet drizzle, lights blurred and shimmering in the rain-soaked streets below. Samantha sat curled on the sofa, blanket draped over her shoulders, a mug of tea warming her hands. Gabriel sat across from her, legs stretched toward the fire, hands clasped loosely in his lap. For a long moment, neither spoke, letting the soft crackle of flames fill the space between them. Finally, Gabriel exhaled, a long, steady breath that seemed to carry the weight of years. "There's something I've never told anyone," he said quietly. His eyes didn't meet hers, focused instead on the flickering fire. "Something that shaped me." Samantha shifted closer, her fingers tracing the edge of the blanket. "You can tell me," she said softly. He nodded, swallowing hard. "It was my wedding day. My bride. She ran away with my best friend right before the ceremony, left me standing at the altar, alone in front of everyone." The words landed heavy in the room, and Samantha felt her own chest tighten. She could almost picture it, the grand hall, the vows never spoken, the betrayal stark and public. I learned quickly, he continued, voice low, almost bitter. Trust can shatter in a heartbeat, and some wounds, they never fully heal. He glanced at her then, eyes sharp, searching. I buried it under work, control, the things I thought would protect me. But the scar, it never left. Samantha's hand found his across the sofa. A tentative, quiet bridge. I know the feeling, she said, voice trembling slightly. Someone I loved, someone I trusted completely, betrayed me. I never thought I'd recover. His gaze softened, meeting hers fully. Ethan, he asked quietly. She nodded, letting herself breathe the name aloud. He sold me out, humiliated me, used my life as leverage. I swore I'd never let anyone have that power over me again. Gabriel leaned back slightly, absorbing her words. I understand now, he said finally. The way I've watched you, the way I've tried to control everything, it wasn't just about business or even protection. It was fear. Fear of losing someone I couldn't replace. Fear of seeing you hurt the way I once was. Samantha's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. And yet, here we are, surviving, somehow. He reached for her hand again, fingers intertwining with hers. Not just surviving. He whispered, learning, maybe even healing. The fire popped, sending a faint shower of sparks up the chimney. Outside, rain whispered against the windows. Inside, the warmth of the flames, the closeness of their bodies, and the shared scars created a space where nothing else existed. Samantha let herself lean closer, resting her head near his shoulder. I never thought I could feel safe again, she admitted, voice low. Not after everything, but with you, I think I can. Gabriel's hand tightened over hers, an anchor in the quiet, and I never thought I'd allow someone in. Not fully, not with my walls, my control, my mistakes. But you're different. You don't just see the armor, you see me. She lifted her eyes to his, finding the vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to witness. Then maybe that's enough, she said softly. For both of us. He nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing for the first time in weeks. Enough, he repeated. Enough to start again. They sat together, hands entwined, letting the firelight and quiet fill the gaps where pain had once lived. The past, the betrayals, the lies, the heartbreak was still there, etched into them like scars. But now, in this soft glow, they understood each other in a way no one else ever could. A small smile curved Samantha's lips. We're both broken, she said lightly, almost teasing. And yet, somehow, we keep finding pieces to put together. Gabriel's lips lifted faintly. Not pieces, foundations, he corrected gently. We're building something real, from the scars we've carried. She laughed softly, a warm sound that mingled with the crackle of the fire. Then, let's keep building, she whispered. He leaned closer, brushing his forehead against hers. Together, he promised. Outside, the city lights twinkled faintly through the drizzle, but inside, between the warmth of the fire and the quiet confession of hearts laid bare, Samantha and Gabriel discovered something far stronger than fear or betrayal, a shared understanding, a fragile trust, and the beginning of healing that could finally make them whole. And as the night deepened, they remained there, hands clasped, hearts aligned, ready to face whatever storms might come next. Scarred, yes, but stronger, together, and finally unafraid to let love in. The morning was crisp, the kind of Seattle day where the sky was a pale gray, and the air carried the scent of wet pavement and early blooms. Samantha stood in the hall outside the grand conference room, her hands pressed lightly against the polished wood paneling. Reporters had gathered, flashes already stuttering, cameras focused, microphones raised. The news had leaked again, but this time, it wasn't about scandal or deceit. This time, it was about the truth, and the truth was heavy with stakes she hadn't dared to imagine. Inside, Gabriel adjusted his tie, calm, composed, yet there was a tension in his shoulders that spoke of the battles he had fought to reach this moment. He glanced at her, a faint smile teasing his lips. "Ready?" he asked quietly. She nodded, her heart thudding in her chest. The past months had been a whirlwind: fear, anger, betrayal, healing, and finally, the fragile, undeniable warmth of love. Standing beside him now, she felt that warmth spread like fire through her chest. The doors opened, and the world fell into place. Cameras clicked, voices rose in a cacophony of questions, and yet Gabriel walked forward with a calm authority that commanded silence almost immediately. Samantha followed, steps steady, heart racing. He stopped at the center of the room, and the murmurs hushed. "Yes," he began, voice carrying, smooth, deliberate. "Yes, the rumors are true." He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. "We started as a marriage of convenience, a contract, a business arrangement." The room shifted, flashes strobing, pens poised, people leaning forward. Samantha's fingers tightened around the edge of her dress. "But," he continued, eyes locking on hers, warm and unflinching, "today, I stand here to make one thing clear." He took a step closer to her, and the room seemed to shrink around them. "I choose Samantha Brooks, not because of obligation, not because of contract, but with my heart." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the soft click of a camera shutter. Samantha blinked rapidly, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. Her chest felt tight, her breath shallow. She had known he cared, that he had always protected her, but hearing the words, hearing them in front of the world, made something inside her shiver and melt at the same time. One of the reporters finally spoke, voice hesitant. "But the contract." Gabriel shook his head, calm, unyielding. The contract was never about love. It was never about what we feel for each other. Today, that changes. My choice is hers, hers alone, and that choice comes from my heart, not from paper or obligation. Samantha felt her tears fall, hot and unrestrained. She pressed a hand over her mouth, trying to hold back sobs. But it was impossible. Relief, disbelief, and joy collided inside her, spilling outward in a tremor she could not hide. Gabriel turned slightly, tilting his head so he could see her, and his eyes softened. The fire of authority was still there, but now tempered with tenderness. "This is my declaration," he said quietly, yet everyone could hear. "She is my wife, and I will always choose her." The world seemed to hold its breath. Cameras clicked faster, murmurs rose, then fell, and yet the focus remained on them two people, standing together, exposed but unafraid. Samantha felt her hands shake, but she lifted them, reaching for him, intertwining her fingers with his. He gave her a small, steady squeeze, and in that simple gesture, she felt the promise behind his words, the unwavering, unspoken vow that no storm, no rumor, no challenge could undo what they had built. Samantha's voice trembled as she whispered, almost to herself, I love you." He bent slightly, brushing his lips against her forehead, a quiet acknowledgement that was louder than any statement could be. "I love you too," he said, low, deliberate, and unshakably certain. Outside, the city carried on, oblivious to the declaration, but inside the room, time seemed to slow. Every flash, every click, every pointed question faded into insignificance. There was only this moment, heart to heart, hand in hand, truth laid bare before a world that could no longer misunderstand them. Samantha's tears spilled freely, warm and liberating, her chest full of a joy she hadn't dared to imagine. She had fought, survived, healed, and now she could finally feel safe in the certainty of his love. Gabriel's hand moved to her cheek, brushing a tear away. "No one will ever make you feel less than you are," he whispered. "Not now, not ever." She pressed closer, resting her forehead against his, letting the warmth of his words and presence soak through every scar she had carried. For the first time, Samantha realized that love didn't have to be complicated. It didn't have to be hidden behind walls or contracts. It could be declared openly, boldly, and yet tenderly. And standing there, in the quiet aftermath of his words, she knew whatever storms lay ahead. They would face them together, strong, unbroken, and unafraid. And as the reporters began to murmur again, flashes still strobing, Samantha leaned into him, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of what had been promised, not in contracts, not in whispers, but in the unwavering choice of a heart. The night was thick with fog, low and heavy over the deserted docks where Samantha had been taken. Her wrists were bound with rough rope, bruising already forming against her skin, and her breath came shallow, fast. Daniel's laughter echoed off the metal containers, harsh and mocking, while Ethan prowled near the edge, watching her like a predator. The two men had formed a dangerous alliance, one fueled by revenge, greed, and old grudges. Samantha's heart pounded as she strained against her bonds, but they were tight, and there was no one around to hear her. Somewhere deep in her chest, fear coiled tightly, but beneath it was a spark faith in him. Gabriel. He wouldn't let this end with her in their hands. He wouldn't. Suddenly, the night was pierced by the screech of tires. A black SUV rounded the corner, headlights cutting through the fog. Samantha squinted, and her pulse skipped. One man, Gabriel, stepped out, coat soaked from the drizzle, eyes hard, purposeful. His presence was commanding, almost electric in its intensity. "Let her go," he said, voice low, cold, every word deliberate. Daniel smirked. "Or what? Stone? You'll try to fight us?" Gabriel's eyes narrowed. "I don't negotiate with threats," he replied, taking a measured step closer. "And I don't share my wife with liars and thieves." The fight erupted suddenly, swift and brutal. Gabriel moved with a precision born of years in power, each strike deliberate, calculated, yet fueled by something deeper, a desperate need to protect, to reclaim what was his. Ethan lunged, knife glinting under the dim lights, and Gabriel countered, a sharp movement that sent the blade clattering across the metal floor. Samantha watched, breath caught, heart in her throat. She had known he was strong, but seeing him like this relentless, fearless, unyielding made the fear and admiration twist into something almost painful. Every blow he struck was measured, yet every glance toward her revealed the raw vulnerability behind his strength. She wasn't just a target. She was the reason he fought with everything. The struggle continued, tense and chaotic. Containers rattled, shadows leapt across the fog, the sound of fists striking flesh, grunts, and commands filling the night. Gabriel's jacket was torn, sweat and rain mixing, but his eyes never left Samantha. When Daniel lunged again, Gabriel grabbed him, twisting him off balance, tossing him to the ground. Ethan made one final desperate move, and Gabriel, with a roar of frustration and fury, disarmed him, pinning him against the wall. Samantha's hands trembled as she watched him. "Gabriel," she whispered, voice barely audible. He looked at her then, chest heaving, eyes wild, and in that instant, the ice of his former self shattered completely. "No contract," he said, voice raw, nearly breaking, no terms, no clauses, nothing binds my love but my choice. "And I choose you." Tears blurred her vision as the words sank in. The fear, the terror of the night, the uncertainty, all of it fell away under the weight of his declaration. He moved toward her, cutting through the fog and fear, reaching for her with hands that trembled slightly, not with weakness, but with relief and longing. Samantha didn't hesitate. She ran into his arms, clutching him, feeling the warmth, the safety, the undeniable reality of him. He held her tight, strong but careful, as if she were both fragile and precious, letting the adrenaline and the storm outside mix with the emotion between them. Behind them, the men were subdued, groaning, defeated, the threat extinguished. But inside the embrace of Gabriel's arms, Samantha didn't notice the chaos. She only noticed him alive, present, unbroken, holding her with a devotion that words could not capture. "I won't ever let you go," he whispered against her hair, voice rough, steadying. "You're mine, in every way that matters. Nothing else counts." "I'm here," she murmured, voice shaky, clutching his jacket, letting herself be protected, letting herself feel safe for the first time in hours. They stayed like that, the world narrowing to the circle of heat and heartbeats between them, until the fog of fear slowly lifted. The rain had stopped, leaving only the distant echo of water dripping from rooftops. Finally, he pulled back slightly, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. His eyes were dark, exhausted, but there was a fire there she had never seen before, a promise, a warning, a devotion that neither storms nor schemes could undo. "No one," he said softly, almost to himself, "ever hurts what's mine." Samantha leaned into him again, letting her forehead rest against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. She had been terrified, bruised by fear and uncertainty, but now, in the shelter of his arms, she felt something unshakable. They had survived. They were battered, yes, wounded, yes, but together. And for the first time since the chaos had begun, Samantha allowed herself to believe fully in what Gabriel had said, in the strength of their bond, and in the promise of what they could face together, unbroken, unafraid. The night held them close, quiet now, except for the faint hum of distant city lights. And as she whispered, almost inaudibly, "I'm here, always," she felt the last remnants of fear dissolve. In Gabriel's arms, the world could threaten, schemes could rise, and enemies could try. But nothing, not contracts, not betrayal, not fear could bind the love they had chosen, and in that choice, they found salvation together. The morning sun filtered gently through the leaves of the small garden, painting the yard in soft gold and green. Birds chirped quietly, and a faint breeze rustled the petals of late-blooming flowers. Samantha stood beneath a simple wooden arch, white lace fluttering lightly in the wind. Her hands were folded, her heart full and steady, though a quiet tremor ran through her chest. She looked around at the small circle of family and friends, their faces warm, smiling, present, but it was the man across from her who held her attention completely. Gabriel stepped forward, his hand extended, rough and calloused in contrast to the softness of the moment. His eyes held a quiet intensity, not the command of a CEO, not the armor of a man used to controlling the world, just a man who had survived, who had loved, and who had chosen. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. She nodded, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Yes," she whispered, though no one else heard. The ceremony was simple, no cameras, no flashing lights, no contracts to sign or witnesses to impress beyond the few hearts gathered here. They exchanged vows quietly, words gentle and honest, reflecting the journey that had brought them to this day. Samantha's voice was soft but steady as she spoke. "I promise to love you in quiet mornings and in stormy nights, to stand with you in triumph and in weakness, and to find our home in each other, every day." Gabriel's hand squeezed hers, and when it was his turn, he said, "I promise to choose you every single day, not because of duty, not because of arrangements, but because my heart will not be complete without you. You are my sunrise, my reason, my home." Samantha's chest tightened with emotion, tears sliding down her cheeks as she reached for his hands, feeling the warmth and strength in them, the evidence of all he had endured and the love that had grown despite it all. The garden seemed to pause with them, every leaf, every shadow, holding its breath. There was a moment of quiet long enough to feel the weight of the past year, the battles fought, the storms weathered, and the scars that had brought them here. Samantha's gaze met Gabriel's, and in his eyes, she saw a reflection of her own journey, fear tempered by courage, pride softened by trust, pain transformed into resilience. No words were necessary for the next few seconds. They simply stood there, hands entwined, listening to the soft rustle of leaves, the distant hum of life beyond the garden walls, and the steady beating of their own hearts. The air was warm, scented faintly with flowers and earth, carrying a sense of peace neither had known in a long time. Gabriel leaned forward slightly, brushing a damp strand of hair from Samantha's face. "You are the sunrise of my life," he murmured, voice low and intimate. Samantha pressed her forehead against his chest, letting the warmth of his words settle deep inside her. "And you are where I come home," she whispered back, voice trembling with relief, love, and gratitude. The officiant smiled quietly, stepping back, giving them space in that simple, sacred pause. It wasn't the grandeur of ceremony or the spectacle of the world that made this moment remarkable. It was the honesty, the healing, the recognition that two broken, battered hearts had found a way to be whole together. They exchanged rings, sliding them onto each other's fingers with gentle hands, not as symbols of obligation, but as quiet markers of choice, of trust, of endurance. Gabriel's fingers lingered on hers a second longer, and Samantha felt a surge of warmth, the lingering echo of every battle, every fear, every tear, and every victory they had shared. A soft breeze carried the scent of jasmine and wet earth across the garden. Samantha closed her eyes, letting herself inhale the present, the peace, the relief of knowing that they were safe, together, unbroken. Gabriel's hand covered hers, and she felt the steady pulse beneath his palm, a reminder of life, love, and the journey that had brought them here. As the ceremony concluded, no applause, no fanfare, just a gentle nod, a smile, a quiet acknowledgement from those who loved them. Gabriel and Samantha stepped forward, hands clasped, hearts aligned, walking slowly down the small garden path. The sunlight dappled the ground, flickering through leaves, casting moving patterns across their intertwined hands. Samantha glanced up at him, eyes shining. "It feels right," she said softly. Gabriel looked down, voice low and tender. "It feels like home," he replied. And in that shared silence, they both understood that home wasn't a house, a city, or a name on a document. Home was a choice, a heartbeat, a presence. Home was the hand they held, the trust they nurtured, the love that had survived fear, betrayal, and storms. Samantha let out a small laugh, a sound light and free, carried by the breeze. Gabriel mirrored it, their laughter mingling, fragile and beautiful. There was nothing else in the world that mattered in that moment except the truth between them, the quiet, unshakable bond that had grown stronger with every trial. He pulled her gently toward the edge of the garden, where the sunlight glimmered more brightly. "Let's start again," he said simply. "Not as contracts, not as arrangements, not as obligations, but as us." Samantha's eyes filled with tears, warmth spreading through her chest. "As us," she echoed. The world outside continued on, busy and loud, but in that small garden, time seemed to pause. She pressed her cheek to his chest, resting against the steady rise and fall of his shoulders, feeling the rhythm of life and love pulse beneath her fingertips. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Samantha allowed herself to believe fully, not in safety, not in control, not in perfection, but in the quiet, enduring power of choice, forgiveness, and the home they had built in each other. Gabriel bent his head, brushing a kiss softly against her temple. "You are the sunrise of my life," he whispered again, letting the words settle into the space between them. "And you are where I come home," Samantha replied, her voice steady, calm, and certain. They stood together for a long moment, hands entwined, hearts beating in quiet harmony, letting the sunlight warm them, letting the gentle wind carry away every trace of fear and doubt. The past, the betrayals, the pain, the storms was behind them. Ahead lay only this moment, and the promise of countless moments to come, small, tender, real, and whole. And as they walked slowly down the garden path, side by side, their shadows stretching behind them in the morning light, it was clear they were home, not in a place, not in a contract, but in each other. This story is more than a tale of love. It is a lesson in resilience, trust, and the quiet courage it takes to open one's heart. Samantha and Gabriel's journey reminds us that life often challenges us with betrayal, fear, and circumstances beyond our control. Yet, it is through facing these trials that we discover the depth of our strength and the value of vulnerability. True connection is not built on convenience, but on honesty, patience, and the willingness to see another person fully, scars and all. For those of us in later stages of life, this story serves as a gentle reminder that it is never too late to heal old wounds, to forgive, and to embrace love that is real and sustaining. It shows that vulnerability is not weakness, but a bridge to deeper understanding and intimacy. In everyday life, we can carry this lesson by cherishing relationships with authenticity, by standing firmly for what matters to our hearts, and by trusting that, even after hardship, we can find home in one another. Life, like love, is a series of choices, and choosing with the heart often leads to the most meaningful fulfillment. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey with Samantha and Gabriel. If this story touched your heart, please give us a like, share it with someone who might enjoy it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories. Your support means the world and helps us continue bringing these moments of hope, love, and inspiration to life.